Hi everyone, quick note before we start the video. So I filmed how to talk to kids about suicide, and I had a lot of information I wanted to put into it. And it turns out when you film a video with a lot of information, it could turn out to be about 30 minutes long. Who knew? So I figured you guys might not have the time or the energy to take in this much serious material for 30 whole minutes. If you do, kudos to you, because right now it's stressful out there and I don't want to subject you guys to that. So what I decided to do is just cut it in the middle. It might be an awkward cut, but I think it's going to be better than trying to expect you guys to sit there for 30 minutes listening to a talk about suicide. So I'll cut it in the middle. I'll add in another clip to let you guys know that's the end of the video. And then of course I'll start part 2 with a clip just to keep you on track of what you've covered so far and what you're about to cover. Please check out part 2 of the video. Going to be a lot of information, stuff that's very important for every parent to know. So I hope you'll tune in. All right, thank you so much. Here's part 1. Hello, and welcome to our next video in our suicide prevention series. This time we're going to talk about how to talk to kids about suicide. Again, my name is Melissa Knight, and I'm with Crisis Services of North Alabama. You may have seen my coworker, Taylor Yazidis, in some of these other videos. Hopefully you've watched those. If not, go back and check them out. There should be hopefully some great information in there for you guys. Lots of different topics, coping skills, what to do if someone is suicidal, warning signs, myths, misconceptions, all that great stuff is in some of our other videos. So if you want to get that information, by all means, go check those out. But today, talking to kids about suicide. So let's get started. I'm going to make this as brief as I can and as simple as I can. I've got a lot of information to go over with you, so stay with me. All right. First rule when you talk to kids about suicide is actually don't panic. When we're answering phone calls here at CSNA, there's something we like to say. We like to try to be a non-anxious presence for the person who's in crisis. If your child is in crisis, if their friend is in crisis, if they're talking to you about suicide at all, it's important to stay calm and not give them the idea that this is something to panic over, because reaching out for help is the right thing to do, and we don't want to make them even more scared and even more wound up than they already are by losing our cool. So stay calm. So this is a common problem. I don't want to dump a bunch of statistics on you guys, but I do want you to know that by middle school, 1 in 3 children have experienced mood dysregulation that scares them. This does not necessarily mean that that many children will go on to have mental health issues, but it does mean that 1 in 3 already by middle school have something that they may be struggling with and need to talk to someone about, need to reach out for. So just be aware, it's very common for kids to be going through this. Again, not necessarily a mental health issue, but I do want to point out that 2 out of 3 teens who experience depression don't get any treatment whatsoever. This is a topic that's close to my heart because this was me in high school. I had depression. I didn't know what it was called. I didn't know there was anything wrong. I didn't know to reach out. I just knew I felt awful and I didn't know why. So it's important to have these conversations with our kids from a younger age about mental health and reaching out for help, because we want them to know that if they're in distress and emotional pain, or if they're even going through a suicidal crisis, we want them to know that we are there for them to come to. So just some information for you guys there. So when talking to kids about suicide, age matters. So we're going to go over the ages and talk a little bit about how you can approach it based on the age. I've got some examples here. So if we look at preschool and kindergarten, we want to stick to the basics. We don't want to give any unnecessary or extraneous details to what we're saying. So if you've lost someone to suicide and you want to address it with your kindergartner or your preschooler, you can say something like, Uncle Joe is very sick and he didn't get better. We're all very sad. You don't have to go into details. You don't have to specifically talk about suicide in this instance. Just, basics. Age 7 to 10, you're going to want to give short, true answers. And this is important for this age group. Let their questions guide the discussion. Because if we start talking and talking and talking, we may be giving them information that overwhelms them, information that they're not ready to process yet. So we want to stick to their questions, answer them in a short, truthful, matter-of-fact way, and we want to, again, stay calm. So an example for this age might be something like, Uncle Joe had an illness called depression. He died from his illness, but I wish he would have been able to get more help. So we can go into a little bit more detail. What's depression, they may ask. So you can start that conversation, and you can have a conversation about this with your child. Again, let their questions lead the discussion. Don't give them too much information. They may not know what to do with all that. moving on. Age 11 to 14, we want to be more concrete. And this is where we want to ask questions of them. We want to gauge what their beliefs on suicide are, what they've heard, what they already know. They may have some correct information or be assuming that some myths that aren't true are actually true. They may be hearing things from their friends or from media, so they're hearing about it. By age 11 to 14, they're hearing about suicide. They know it exists. They know that people go through suicidal crisis. They may have a friend or two who's been through it. So this is middle school age. This is when, what I mentioned earlier, 1 in 3 kids, have emotional distress that scares them. So your kid is gonna have ideas about it. So we wanna ask them questions, see what they think about it, correct any misinformation they may have, and just have that discussion. So example could be, what did you hear about Uncle Joe? What do you know about suicide? What are your beliefs about it? You want to find out where they are, and you want to meet them where they are at in this conversation so that they can process this easily and go through this information, in a way that they're capable of going through it. Okay, so high school. This is important. For high school, we're not going to ask if, we're going to ask when. By high school, your child knows of someone who is going through some sort of crisis or has been through some sort of crisis. One of their classmates may have been hospitalized for a suicide attempt. One of their classmates may be self-harming, or what we call it in my field, non-suicidal self-injury, but we'll go over that in a minute. They probably know of someone, if not a good friend, who's been going through some sort of mental health crisis, if not they themselves. So for high school, we're not saying if, we're saying when. So what will you do when your friends or yourself deal with health issues or suicidal thoughts? We want to address them as adults because that's the way they want to be spoken to. And if we start getting too condescending or too simple, they're going to probably turn off of the conversation because they don't want to be lied to and they don't want to be talked to like children. So we never have to go into the means of suicide used. We never have to go into the more unpleasant details. We just we want the conversation to be on your child and their friends and equipping them to know what to do when this happens, to know to reach out for help, to get adults that they know who can help them, and a plan for what they'll do when this comes up in their lives, whether it be themselves or a friend of theirs. So not if, when. So opening up the talk. So this here we're talking about there has been no suicide loss. We're going to cover that in a minute. But here we want to start the conversation. We don't have a particular thing that happened. We just want to start the conversation. So one good way that you can open up is using media that your child has already been exposed to that deals with suicide. So maybe they're in middle school and they watched a popular Netflix TV show, 13 Reasons Why. You may have heard of that show. It deals with suicide, and it does contain some things about suicide that are not necessarily true or not the best thing to believe about it. So that makes it a perfect opportunity to talk to your kids about it. If you have a kid who watched this show or is watching this show, they may be getting some misinformation. So this is a great time to sit down with them and say, well, what has this show taught you? What are the beliefs you took away from this show? You can open it up that way. Or, schoolwork. Maybe in high school they're reading Romeo and Juliet. That deals with suicide. You can ask them what they thought about that, like where their brain is on that subject. Death of a salesman. Maybe your child is in college and you've missed this talk so far. So you want to open it up for an adult child. Maybe they're going through, college courses that have work that deal with suicide, literature courses, things like that. So keep an eye out for those chances to open it up. Also, one thing that I didn't know whether or not to mention on here or not, but I think it's probably important for you guys to know as parents. It's pretty popular online to use dark humor to cope with things right now. A lot of conversation online with young kids about trauma and depression and going through things, and they make a lot of jokes about it, make a lot of jokes about suicide. So if your child is on the internet a lot, they probably run across this brand of dark humor. You could ask them what you think about this. You could ask them what they think about people joking about suicide. Is that helpful? Is that unhelpful? Like how, you can open up the conversation in a myriad of different ways. Just keep your eyes open for that chance. Or, if you're the kind of parent who likes to just get down right to it, then just sit your child down and start having that conversation, start asking questions. So those are some ways to open it up. So for younger kids, if you want to open up the talk, you can compare mental health distress to a concept that they're already familiar with, like physical distress, headaches, tummy aches, scraped knees, etc. Your children know to ask for help for these physical issues. So you can explain to them that when they're in emotional pain, when they're feeling very sad or very angry, they can also come to you and ask for your help with this, just like they would a scraped knee. So that's a good way to open up the conversation for a younger child. You want to let them know, hey, when you're in emotional pain, you come to me just like you would if you were in physical pain, and we're going to work on it together. So that's a good way for the younger kids. After a loss. All right, first I want to say, if you have had a recent suicide loss in your family or in your community, I'm so sorry. It's so painful, it's so hard to go through, and I want you to know that grief is a process. It is not linear. You can take as much time in it as you want, and you can deal with things however you feel is best for you. So my condolences if this is the case for you. But continuing on. After a loss, it is important to address the issue of suicide if the child has lost someone or knows of someone who has died by suicide. Very important to get on that conversation right away. We don't want to wait until they get misinformation. We don't want to wait until they get extraneous details that they're not equipped to process. We want to be the ones to start this conversation with them, because we want to be the ones to guide them through this. So it's important to have this conversation right away, as soon as you reasonably can. So the truth is important. Don't lie. Don't lie about it. Again, you don't have to go into the means of suicide, the extraneous details, but be honest. So the truth is important. Stay age appropriate, stay calm, and answer questions honestly. Always reinforce to the child that you are there for them and that reaching out for help is the right thing to do. So when you talk about suicide in the context of a loss, maybe you would want to put the emphasis on, we wish that they had gotten more help. We wish they'd been able to get more help. You know what to do if you're in emotional pain, right? You reach out for help, and I'm going to be here. Just assure them that this is the right thing to do and that you're there, that you are there. They don't have to worry about judgment. They don't have to worry about punishment. They don't have to worry about anything except for acceptance and help when they reach out to you. So that's important for them to know. All right, that was part 1 of our suicide video on how to talk to kids about suicide. I hope you found a lot of valuable information, and I hope it made you feel equipped to be a helper for not just the kids in your home, but the kids in their lives and the kids in the broader community as well. So thank you so much for joining us for part 1. Please tune into part 2. I've got so much information left to give you guys. Thank you.